There is a massive movement happening within the longevity and aging landscape. It turns out there is much we can do to extend our lifespan and reverse the effects of aging. What we've been taught and led to believe about aging and human disease are now outdated and no longer accurate. That means it's time to change the current mainstream paradigm and have different kinds of conversations when it comes to our well-being. And it's time to recognize that we have the power within ourselves to dictate and drive our own health span and aging journey. Hi, I'm Suzaida Hippolito, host of Timeless Vitality, where we are redefining aging so we become truly timeless. When we experience health challenges or issues, we go to the doctor. That is our cultural and societal conditioning. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm simply pointing out that is our automatic knee-jerk response. We go to the doctor, we get tests done, and then we get prescribed medications. However, medications oftentimes only manages the symptoms and numbs the pain. They don't typically deal with the root cause. And because medications don't deal with the root cause, whatever's going on in our body, it reoccurs or it progresses and gets worse. Unfortunately, the Western world of mainstream medicine does not focus on healing the root cause. Now, I am all about healing the root cause. And if you're like me, or if you're someone who's ready to transform their health challenges on a deeper level, and I mean transform physiologically and biologically, then you are going to be so grateful for Dr. Nathan Bryan and his work with nitric oxide. Nathan is pioneering the future of medicine and transforming our understanding of human health and human optimization. He is an international leader in molecular medicine and nitric oxide biochemistry. He's founded several companies, including Human Inc., NEMA Nitric Oxide Innovations, Bryan Nutraceuticals, and Bryan Therapeutics. His product innovations with this molecule, nitric oxide, have yielded more than $1 billion in sales. Now, before Nathan became an entrepreneur, he was in academic medicine for 25 years, during which time he made many discoveries with this molecule, nitric oxide. And everything he learned about healthy aging, longevity, and human optimization revolved around this molecule. And his research is also showing that this molecule can treat and prevent human diseases such as Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, and a host of other chronic health conditions. I'm so excited to have him here today. Hi, Nathan. Where are you joining us from? I know you travel constantly. Where in the world are you today?
Well, thank you so much, and good morning from Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles, in a hotel room where it seems I spend a lot of my time really traveling the world and educating and informing on the importance of nitric oxide. So thanks so much for the wonderful introduction and for the opportunity to share with your audience the important aspect of nitric oxide.
Now, you are about to speak at a very big event in Los Angeles. Can you give us a little sneak peek about that?
Yeah, so it's part of the Dragon Parade, the Chinese New Year. There'll be several 100,000 people here. We've got in collaboration with a company called AI Wellness, where we're really transforming the education and awareness around medicine, a new way to do medicine. And you brought up a very good point in terms of the practice of Western medicine. It's a reactive approach. So what we're trying to do in collaboration with AI Wellness is get the information out there, because the science has evolved so rapidly over the past 20 years that it's not a lack of understanding of human disease. It's really the application of the new science and product technology into patient care. So Now we can inform and educate patients and consumers so they can take control of their own health and be proactive instead of reactive. So I'm excited to be a part of this. And then tomorrow I'm off to Zurich for some more meetings and then London. So again, it just continues on really our efforts to educate the world on the importance of nitric oxide.
Oh my goodness. Well, before we get into that topic, I want to ask, when did you first know, Nathan, that you wanted to go into human physiology and biology and biochemistry?
I was good in math and science. I graduated at the top of my class in high school, but really didn't know. And I went to a very small school in Texas, about, I think, 100 people in my graduating class. And it really wasn't until I was in the University of Texas, where I was pursuing a degree in biochemistry, and I got a chance to do undergraduate research. And I really fell in love with the feeling of discovery, because really in the basic sciences, you can ask any question you want and then design experiments and get the answers to that question. And it allows you complete intellectual freedom to answer some important biological questions. So, and with a bachelor's degree in biochemistry, I knew I wasn't armed with enough education and experience to really make an impact. So from there, I went to LSU School of Medicine and I got a PhD in molecular and cellular physiology. And it was there I was introduced in this whole science of nitric oxide, because a Nobel Prize had just been awarded for the discovery of nitric oxide. It was a new expanding field in medicine. So that's really what got me interested in it. There were still a lot of unanswered questions on how does the human body produce nitric oxide? What is it? What does it control? And then, how do you fix patients that can't make, or they've lost the ability to produce nitric oxide? So that really got me laser focused on this, and, spent the next 25 years really focused on nitric oxide. I trained up in Boston Medical Center in cardiology and vascular biology, and then was actually recruited by one of the gentlemen who shared the Nobel Prize to be faculty at the University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston at the Institute of Molecular Medicine. And it was there that I got really busy and laser focused on trying to answer these important questions in medicine and science. And we made a lot of discoveries, published over 100 peer-reviewed papers, have several dozen issued patents. So then the question was, how do we create this nitric oxide therapeutic or product technology? And how do we get it in the hands of billions of people around the world? Because even 20 years ago, we knew that the scientific community knew that nitric oxide was the future of medicine and how we were going to treat patients for the next 100 years.
Oh, I have so many questions. And my first question is, why does it take so long for discoveries to really truly reach like the mainstream? Because your work is just recently starting to explode, even though you've been researching it for decades.
Right. On average, it takes about 17 years for new discoveries to become standard practice. And I think, so that's on average. Obviously, some discoveries take much less time and others take much longer. But I think there's a reason for that, and some good reasons and some really bad reasons, and that we have to change. So for new discoveries to be introduced into clinical practice, it has to stand the test of time, right? It has to be proven out, both on the basic science and kind of mechanism of action standpoint, but also proven safe and effective in clinical practice. So now, the Nobel Prize was awarded 25 years ago, so we're certainly past that 17 years in terms of nitric oxide. And for me, I think the limitation is in the fact that there's not any approved drugs for nitric oxide. So in terms of clinical practice, there's not a test or diagnostic for patients with nitric oxide deficiency, and there's really no drug that doctors can prescribe, even if they recognize that this is a problem in their patients. And that's what we're trying to change. We're moving this technology through the FDA, bring awareness in Western medicine, so that not only can physicians diagnose patients that have nitric oxide deficiency, but then be able to prescribe a safe and effective drug that restores the production of this critical molecule. And I think then, we've been very successful in the nutrition, dietary supplement, and skincare, but it's still not part of the standard of care of medicine. And that's what we're hoping to change.
Mm-hmm. Now, can you describe nitric oxide to us as if we were a 10-year-old?
Well, it's really a signaling molecule, and it's how cells in the body communicate with one another. And interestingly enough, and what makes this molecule so fascinating is it's a gas. So it's a gas that's produced in the lining of the blood vessels. It's produced in our neurons, the cells in our brain, and it's produced by our immune system. And once it's produced, it's gone in less than a second. So as it's being produced, it activates and binds its targets and then initiates a number of cell signaling events. So for example, it tells the blood vessels to dilate and expand so we can now improve blood flow and oxygenation and circulation to every organ, tissue, and cell in the body. It maintains the integrity of the entire cardiovascular system, prevents inflammation, oxidative stress, and immune dysfunction, which are really the problems with every major chronic disease in the world. So what we're finding is, in our discoveries back in 2007 revealed for the first time that nitric oxide is a hormone. And similar with a lot of hormones, the older we get, the less our body makes. So we have to practice hormone replacement therapy, but we have to do it in a responsible manner that recapitulates what the body would normally produce. So the older we get, the less nitric oxide we make. When we lose the ability to make nitric oxide, that's the earliest event in the onset and progression of most, if not all, chronic diseases. So we have to be able to, number one, diagnose it, recognize it in patients, and then give the right amount of nitric oxide to the right patient at the right time to make them better.
Now, when do we start decreasing in our production of nitric oxide? And are there any symptoms that go along with that when we start to see the reduction that we can be aware of?
Yeah, the clinical data are very well explained. So in terms of, if we just look at broad population-based studies, meaning taking people at different age groups, and what the data reveal is that, even in our early 20s, we start to lose the production of nitric oxide. In fact, about 10 to 12% per decade. So really by the time we're 40 or 50 years old, we've lost, almost 50% of the nitric oxide we had when we were younger. Now we can accelerate or decelerate that process. So today we know that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. I turned 50 a couple of months ago, but I've got the biological age of a 32-year-old. And to the contrary, we see people that are in their early 20s that have the vascular age or biological age of a 60 or 70-year-old. So now we know how to shift this curve to the left or to the right. But the most important thing we have to do is recognize the symptoms, as you brought up, because there's no diagnosis, there's no lab we can run to draw blood and then get a number and say, oh, well, you're nitric oxide deficient. So the first sign and symptom that usually shows up is sexual dysfunction. And that's in both men and women. 50% of the men over the age of 40 self-report erectile dysfunction. So that's usually the first sign and symptom, because if your blood vessels in the sex organs can't make nitric oxide, you don't get the vasodilation, you don't get engorgement that's required for erections in both men and women. So if you have endothelial dysfunction or vascular dysfunction in the sex organs, then you have that same dysfunction in the blood vessels of the heart, the brain, the liver. It's really a systemic disease. So that's first. And we call that the canary in the coal mine. It's really signs and symptoms of a systemic disease called endothelial dysfunction and nitric oxide deficiency. So pay attention to that. Number two, your blood pressure starts to go up, because nitric oxide is the main vasodilator, meaning the molecule that allows for the dilation of the blood vessels. So it can normalize blood pressure. If you lose the ability to produce nitric oxide, you've got chronically constricted blood vessels, you've got the same volume of blood going through smaller pipes, your pressure goes up. The next thing is usually metabolic disease and insulin resistance. And we published in 2011 that nitric oxide is part of the insulin signaling pathway. So if your cells can't make nitric oxide, you develop insulin resistance. 9 out of 10 Americans have some form of metabolic disease. So it's really a global pandemic of nitric oxide deficiency. Next, you start to lose your memory, vascular dementia, Alzheimer's, because without adequate blood flow to the brain cannot perform. And then lastly, people become exercise intolerant. They get shortness of breath, chest pain, and really those are the late symptoms of ischemic heart disease that result from a complete loss of nitric oxide production in the lining of the blood vessels of the heart.
Now, what you describe is such, at least for me, it's such a mental shift, because in terms of what's causing the sexual dysfunction, what's causing the shortness of breath or exercise intolerance and high blood pressure, to me, that like hearing this for the first time is such a mental shift, because I've never heard this before. We often think of like with those kinds of conditions, we fundamentally think like something's wrong with us. It's diet, it's in our heads. And so, and so many people, to your point, you said 9 out of 10 people suffer from a metabolic disease. So this is like everybody is pretty much deficient in nitric oxide production. So what causes the deficiency? What causes us to decline in our nitric acid production?
It's really multifactorial. There's not a single cause, but what we're finding is it's really the Western lifestyle. It's the foods we eat. It's really the busy lifestyle. It's pharmacotherapy. There's some genetic issues, what we call single nucleotide polymorphisms or SNPs, that lead to a reduction in nitric oxide. But really, the main problem is the diet, the Western diet. It's a diet that's replete in processed foods and refined sugars and high carbohydrate meals. It's lack of physical activity. You know, we're sedentary by nature, right? Nobody moves anymore. Nobody sweats, and we become nitric oxide deficient. The foods we eat here in America are deficient of most nutrients, and they're causing inflammation, insulin resistance, and shutting down nitric oxide production. The other major cause are things like mouthwash. You know, we published over 10 years ago that people who use mouthwash destroy the microbiome, the bacteria that are responsible for producing nitric oxide. Their blood pressure goes up and they become nitric oxide deficient. And 2 out of 3 Americans wake up every morning and use mouthwash. And 2 out of 3 Americans have an unsafe elevation in blood pressure. So this is not coincidental. So, you know, we don't take an antibiotic every day for the rest of our life because of the known collateral damage antibiotics do on the microbiome. So why would we use an antiseptic mouthwash that completely destroys the oral microbiome and it's causing systemic disease? It's leading to chronic nitric oxide deficiency. The other problem is antacids, you know, specifically proton pump inhibitors. 200 million prescriptions are written for these drugs every year. You can now buy them over the counter, Prilosec, Prevacid, omeprazole. Those completely shut down nitric oxide production. And so today we know that people who have been on these class of drugs, the proton pump inhibitors, for 3 years have 40% higher incidence of heart attack, stroke, and Alzheimer's. And mechanistically, we know because it's completely shutting down nitric oxide production. So if we just stop doing the things that disrupt nitric oxide production, quit using mouthwash, get rid of fluoride in your toothpaste, get off antacids, and then eat a balanced diet in moderation, moderate physical exercise, 20, 30 minutes of direct sunlight a day, now our body can actually be primed to produce this critical molecule, and our body heals itself. And so I think what I've learned in 25 years of academic medicine is that people get sick for 2 reasons and 2 reasons only. Their body's missing something that it needs, or it's exposed to something that it doesn't need. So if we give the body the missing nutrients and eliminate from the body toxins or exposure to toxins that are interfering with normal physiology, the human body is regenerative by nature. The body heals itself. So we're never deficient in a drug that inhibits cholesterol production. We're never deficient in a drug that inhibits an enzyme called the ACE receptor or angiotensin converting enzyme. And these are the main medications that doctors are prescribing to treat hypertension or hyperlipidemia. So if we apply these basic principles of physiology, replace missing nutrients, remove the toxins, then the body heals itself. And in that model, there is no room for drug therapy.
Got it. Got it. Wow, that's it. It truly is about a lifestyle shift. I know I've completely shifted my lifestyle over the past several years. And I'm 47 and my biological age is 33. So we're in the same range. Yes. And I love, and completely appreciate that your work focuses on enhancing, helping the natural intelligence of the human body, because many drugs out there, prescription drugs, that actually suppresses the intelligence of the human body, whereas yours, it helps that along. Now, can I saw a post on LinkedIn where you were talking about Alzheimer's, and that your research is showing that this molecule, nitric oxide, can treat and prevent Alzheimer's. Struggling saying that word.
Can you tell us more about that claim?
Yeah, so Alzheimer's is a devastating disease. 55 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's, and it's increasing, 20 to 30% per year. So if we don't do something, we've got a major problem at hand. So we certainly understand the mechanism of action and the onset of Alzheimer's disease. And it's really characterized by two things. It's lack of cerebral blood flow. So if you take Alzheimer's patients and you give them a SPECT scan, which really looks at how well perfused the brain is, there are parts of the brain that aren't getting adequate blood supply. So number one, we call this focal ischemia. There's not enough blood supply getting to certain regions of the brain. Obviously, without oxygen and nutrients, those cells can't do their job. The other problem is the metabolic disease aspect of Alzheimer's. So it's insulin resistance, and you've probably heard Alzheimer's referred to as diabetes type 3. So nitric oxide gets to the root cause of everything we know about Alzheimer's. We can open up the cerebral blood vessels and start perfusing the brain. Nitric oxide improves glucose uptake, overcomes insulin resistance. And so if you get good blood supply to the brain and allow the brain to utilize glucose, which is its main energy substrate, then you can get the good stuff into the cells. You take out the metabolic waste products, and you don't get the beta amyloid, you don't get the tau tangles, you don't get the protein misfolding, and you basically allow for what we call restorative physiology. So the beta amyloid plaque hypothesis of Alzheimer's has failed, and that's why all drugs towards Alzheimer's have failed. These are consequences of the disease. These are not the causes of disease. So targeting the consequence of disease completely explains why these drug therapies have all failed. What we do is completely different. We understand mechanistically what causes the onset and progression of Alzheimer's, and we can give and restore this molecule nitric oxide through our drug therapy, improve cerebral blood flow, improve insulin signaling, glucose uptake, and basically correct all aspects of Alzheimer's disease. It's really that simple, and this will be, it's profound. It'll be life-changing, and we're working now through Bryan Therapeutics to get this drug into clinical trials to show that we can really have a safe and effective therapy for Alzheimer's and many other diseases, by the way.
Wow, wow, wow. And okay, we mentioned chronic disease. First of all, can you define what is chronic disease and give us some statistics to the extent that our world is suffering from chronic diseases?
Well, the statistics tell us that 6 out of 10 people are living with chronic disease. So chronic disease means something that you have over a period of many years that's unresolved with medical therapy. And it's things like cardiovascular disease, it's Alzheimer's, it's autoimmune disease. And those are kind of the broad speaking, kind of encompassing chronic diseases. But when we look at chronic disease, there's common denominators in every. So although they may seem unrelated in terms of autoimmune disease, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, diabetes, mechanistically, they share common traits. And that's lack of blood flow to the affected organ. It's inflammation, oxidative stress, and immune dysfunction. And nitric oxide corrects all those. As we talked about in Alzheimer's, it restores blood flow to the organ. Nitric oxide is extremely anti-inflammatory, meaning that it suppresses the inflammatory response in the lining of the blood vessels. It prevents oxidative stress, and it completely inhibits the immune dysfunction that we see in chronic disease. So for us, it's foundational that we restore the production of nitric oxide in patients with chronic disease, but there may be other issues that we have to resolve, right? Are they exposed to some toxin? Do they have some latent viral infection that becomes activated? Are they becoming allergic to the foods they eat because of poor digestion, because of lack of stomach acid production that's now causing an autoimmune response? So, but nitric oxide is foundational to get to the root cause of that. And then that allows the physicians to dig a little bit deeper, correct the underlying pathology. And then, as we mentioned earlier, the body heals itself.
Wow. Now, can you give a specific result or a testimonial to some of the experiences people have had with nitric oxide in terms of whatever chronic health conditions they may have come to you for?
Yeah, so I always cite our 15-year-old patient, and we published this in the American Journal of Human Genetics back in 2011. But there's a rare genetic disorder called arginosuccinic aciduria. And this is diagnosed early in utero, but these kids are born without an enzyme called arginosuccinate lyase. So without getting too complicated, these kids develop severe resistant hypertension, and they have liver disease, they have kidney disease. And before our technology, there was no treatment that was safe and effective for these kids. So usually they died of liver failure at 7 or 8 years of age without a liver transplant. They were somewhat managed by diet and pharmacotherapy. But we had a case where we had a 15-year-old kid that was in the pediatric intensive care unit. His blood pressure was 200 over 115, and there was no therapy that was available to the physicians to normalize this kid's blood pressure. So we developed our nitric oxide lozenge for him. We started dosing him with our nitric oxide lozenge, and within 4 hours, we had his blood pressure down to 130 over 80. He was released from the hospital, and we've managed this kid. Now this is, I guess, 7 or 8 years ago, but we got him off all prescription medicine. His blood pressure normalized, his kidney disease resolved within 5 days, his heart disease resolved within 5 months. His cognition and memory improved. He started beating his dad in chess. And so this was really, a remarkable, and we saved this kid's life when there was no effective therapy to treat him. And this is a genetic disorder, an inborn error metabolism that nitric oxide completely corrected all the clinical manifestations of this genetic disease. So that's just one, but we've had people with overt cardiovascular disease, 80% stenosis or obstruction of the arteries, take the nitric oxide. 6 months later, the arteries are completely clear. Alzheimer's, people with mild cognitive disorders, exercise performance, well-trained athletes improving their, personal best, PR, personal records. So that's one of the most gratifying things to me is hearing all these people that, text me, call me, email me saying we've changed their lives. And to me, there's nothing more gratifying than that. And that's what convinces me that what we have here will change the world, will certainly change the landscape of medicine. And, said if you change one person's life, you've changed the world. And that's what gets me up every day and keeps me laser focused.
That is incredible. Yes. Talk about remarkable results. Now I work in the world of pharmaceutical clinical research. And so I'm in the space of where I'm in trials where I see the data of many sick patients. And it's really promising to know that there is something out there like this, so profound, miraculous almost, yet it is backed by science. It's heavily researched, it's peer reviewed, and it's backed by science. And as you say, it's changing the landscape of medicine. And it's time. We are so due because Western medicine practices clearly it's not enough because our world hasn't gotten that much better, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, what we try to do is, and drug therapy is based on pharmacology, right? The field of pharmacology. You take a synthetic compound that inhibits some biochemical reaction that, as you mentioned when we started this, it kind of masks the symptoms, but it doesn't get to the root cause. So in our drug discovery program, we're utilizing a new principle of drug therapy called restorative physiology. And what that means is we give the body, we understand the mechanism of the disease to the extent that we can correct it. So most chronic diseases are caused by nitric oxide deficiency. So what do? We give this molecule back, right? It's almost like hormone replacement therapy. If your body can't make estrogen or testosterone, we have to replace that because your body can't make it. And so we're introducing to the human body a molecule that's naturally produced. And our challenge was give nitric oxide at the right dose at the right time to completely recapitulate nitric oxide production and signaling in the human body. So when you do that, there's no side effects, right? So because we're not giving the body a synthetic compound, which most drugs are, that inhibits a biochemical reaction. We're replacing an essential missing molecule that's responsible for health, for regeneration, for optimal circulation, and everything we know about the biochemistry and physiology of the human being.
So is that another way to say that the body is loving the receiving of the nitric oxide? It's like, okay, give me more.
No, that's right. Yeah.
This is what the body needs. Like, so no side effects, really no side effects. That is unheard of.
No, look, I mean, and look, dose dictates the poison, right? So there are toxicities of nitric oxide, and what we have to do in our drug therapy program is provide of nitric oxide, number one, that's safe, doesn't cause side effects. Right. But number two, that's efficacious, that shows efficacy for certain disease indications. And that's our challenge in the drug company, Bryan Therapeutics, is to dial in the right dose for different disease indications. So the dose of nitric oxide we may need for a patient we're treating with Alzheimer's may be completely different than a dose we would need to treat a patient with ischemic heart disease. And same thing with our topical drug for diabetic ulcers. We have to dial in a level of nitric oxide that's going to be effective at not only killing the infection in the wounds, but providing blood flow and hyperemia to that wound so the body can actually activate its own healing properties and get tissue granulation and get blood flow to that wound. So that's our challenge, but we know how to do that. We're very confident in our ability because we understand nitric oxide probably better than any company or certainly any individual out there.
Oh gosh, this is so exciting. Now, what about in the context of mental health? You talk about blood flow or oxygen flow, to the brain. Now, can you give some statistics about our world's current state of its mental health and how nitric oxide supports mental health conditions?
We have an epidemic of mental health, and really this was exacerbated during COVID. When people were isolated, we need the social interactions. And so we have to do it. So in terms of physiology of mental disease, again, it's the same underlying principles and you can do SPECT scans, you can do functional MRIs, but there's reduced blood flow to certain regions of the brain that are responsible for mental disease. So if we restore blood flow, but the other problem is, it gets back to what's missing or exposure to things. So a lot of patients that suffer from mental disease are suffering basic amino acids which serve as neurotransmitters. So it's because potentially they're taking antacids, they can't break down proteins into amino acids that now serve as neurotransmitters, so they become deficient in these neurotransmitter amino acids. So again, it goes back to the same principles we discussed earlier. Give the body what it needs, remove from the body what it doesn't need, and then the body heals itself. So, heavy metals, for instance, cause Parkinson's disease, other mental disorders, because metals are neurotoxins. So again, we have to address the root cause, figure out what's causing the mental disturbances. Is it reduced blood flow? Is it exposure to toxins? Is it missing amino acids that serve as neurotransmitters? And if we address that, then mental disease goes away. It's basic biochemistry and physiology that we certainly understand. We just have to apply that now to individual patients and understand the root cause of their specific disease, whether it's mental disease, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, autoimmune disease. It's all addressable.
This is incredible. I mean, you use the term restorative physiology, and that's a very new term to me. But what I hear in all that, so restorative physiology, you're actually, like you keep saying, you remove from the body what it doesn't need and you give the body what it needs. So you're working with the natural intelligence of the body. That's disruptive to medicine. And you're also focusing on the root causes from the perspective of understanding the mechanism of action of what's causing this condition in the first place, like getting to the root of it. And what was the other thing? Oh, the nitric oxide delivery, being able to customize whatever the dose is needed to a level where there's no side effects.
That's right. Years ago, when Western medicine, even the days of Hippocrates, the father of Western medicine was referred to as applied physiology, right? But today we've moved so far away from those basic fundamental principles. Now medicine is all pharmacology. And because it's $1 trillion industry, right? So companies make these synthetic compounds that apply pharmacology. There's always side effects because these are compounds that the human body is not designed to deal with. And there's always consequences of inhibiting a biochemical reaction, which most drugs are. Now there's biologics, there's monoclonal antibodies that are causing a number of additional risk and disturbing the body's normal response to its normal immune function. So I think we have to get back to the principles of which medicine was founded upon. Give the body what it needs, remove from the body what it doesn't need, the body heals itself. Drugs don't heal patients, physicians don't heal patients, the body heals itself. We just got to get out of the way, give the body what it needs, and we're regenerative by nature and by design.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Like somebody who gets this, who really truly understands and appreciates the intelligence of our human body. And it's very exciting because when we heal these parts of our physiology and biology and our neural chemistry, then we are going to upgrade our human bodies, and we're going to get to experience ourselves, our world, through a very, very different lens. And this is where I know you are about human optimization. So tell us about that.
Well, I think you and I are perfect examples, right? When we employ these principles that good diet, moderate exercise, and optimizing the human body, then our body thanks us for it, right? And so everything we know about longevity, human optimization, and performance revolves around the production of nitric oxide. We mobilize our own stem cells. In fact, nitric oxide is the molecule that tells our own stem cells to mobilize and differentiate to repair and replace dysfunctional tissues. Nitric oxide activates mitochondrial biogenesis, and mitochondria are the energy-producing organelles of the cell. So without adequate mitochondria generating adequate cellular energy, then our cells become dysfunctional. So nitric oxide improves mitochondria efficiency of ATP production, and then it prevents the ends of our telomeres from shortening. So shorter telomeres, shorter lifespan. And we can improve athletic performance. And it's not just athletic performance, it's performance in the bedroom, the boardroom, or even on the playing field, because there's adaptive responses to this. We give the body what it needs, it adapts, and allows us to generate more energy more efficiently with less oxygen. So again, everything we know about human optimization can be traced back to adequate levels of nitric oxide being produced.
So exciting. So exciting. Now, within the context of, what's the next question I want to ask? I'm trying to think. Within the context of being able to access nitric oxide now, because I believe you offer it as supplements, right? Is it available as supplements? Okay, awesome. So go ahead.
Yeah, so when we first developed this technology, we realized because it's all based on natural product chemistry and really no synthetic compounds, we brought this to market as a dietary supplement because we're basically supplementing a missing component that the body's missing. So obviously, if you're deficient in vitamin D, what do? You take vitamin D. If you're deficient in testosterone, we give testosterone. So very similar concept with nitric oxide. If your body can't make nitric oxide, then we do it for you. And what makes our technology different than all the other hundreds of so-called nitric oxide products out there is if your body can't make nitric oxide, then my products do it for you. The issue with other products is they're trying to give you precursors or substrate that your body's lost the ability to utilize to make nitric oxide. In fact, that's the basis for nitric oxide deficiency. So we brought this to market as dietary supplements and nutritional products. We've got a line of skincare products for the aging skin that restores blood flow, that improves collagen, improves hydration, fine lines and wrinkles go away. So those consumer products are available, been on the market for a number of years. Obviously, those aren't intended to treat, cure, prevent any disease. That's the function of the drug company as we move this technology through clinical trials. But we've as you mentioned, got this in the hands of millions of people around the world, and it's really been transformative.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited to give it a try. Now, Nathan, there are 3 questions that I ask all of my speakers. The first one is, what is your number 1 life hack for promoting your own longevity?
Well, if there was one thing, it's certainly sleep. Without adequate sleep, then our body cannot heal and regenerate. Our body regenerates during sleep. If you're not getting good sleep, then your body cannot and will not heal. It's also important that we have nasal breathing when we sleep. The mouth breathers can become hypoxic. Patients with sleep apnea can't produce nitric oxide. And it's during that time that their stem cells don't work. They can't repair and replace, and they develop chronic disease. So for me, it's all about the system. It's providing my body with a source of nitric oxide, and then that basically gives adequate blood supply. We regulate things like melatonin and all these important hormones that lead to adequate sleep. So if there was one thing, it's certainly sleep, because if you don't get adequate sleep, then nothing else matters, and your body cannot heal.
Got it. Now, the next question is this: what are you excited about with the future of longevity?
Well, I'm excited the fact that we know everything we need to know scientifically about longevity. It's really just applying the principles and put it in place. Nitric oxide is at the root and the foundation of longevity. And we kind of touched on this earlier, but when we look at objective measures of longevity, it's really the function of our stem cells, the function of our mitochondria, and how long or short our telomeres are. The telomeres are the ends of the chromosomes that with each cell replication can get shorter, and shorter telomeres, shorter lifespan. So if we want to live longer and live healthy, then we have to focus on those three things: longer telomeres, mitochondria that are functional and produce energy, and adequate stem cells that get the signal to mobilize, differentiate, and repair and replace. And nitric oxide controls and regulates all three of those, prevents telomere shortening, induces mitochondrial biogenesis, and mobilizes our stem cells. Without nitric oxide, you cannot achieve longevity or optimal health. And that excites me because we know how to deliver nitric oxide that can control and regulate all aspects about longevity.
Amazing. That excites me as well.
Yeah, it should. I mean, it's not the lack of information, it's the dissemination of information and the application into clinical practice. And I think that's where the deficiencies are, but thanks to you and many other people who are helping us get our message out there, that'll change.
Got it. Yeah, we are absolutely going to do our best to spread this word. I know that's what my community is about. Now, the third question I ask all my speakers is, what is one thought or action that takes you back to a childlike, playful state?
One thought or action that takes me back to a childlike state. You know, when I look at where I am now and the journey that it took me to get there, I realize how little control I have over this, right? And I think God comes into our lives at certain times, puts people in our lives at specific times, makes us pivot. And so as I look back as a child, I knew I always had a goal and that I thought I was destined for great things, but I had no idea how to get there. And then looking back at all the hurdles we had to overcome, all of the challenges, and I think it's not it's not the challenges that we're faced with, it's how we deal with the challenges, right? Everybody's faced with different challenges. And I look back from the time I was a kid till, through high school, college, and even early in my career, I realized that these so-called bad things that happened or challenges that we incurred or occurred to us really were for a reason. And we have to learn from that and deal with them in a manner that's productive and to live with no regrets. So that's kind of what I take. And I wake up every morning with a deep sense of gratitude because, I am here today based on things that happened to me and that we dealt with in the past. So I live with no regrets. I take everything good, bad, or indifferent that happens to me and recognize this happened for a reason. Now, what is the lesson that we learn from this and how do we move forward in a productive manner? So it's really just all about gratitude.
Gratitude. I love that. Thank you. Thank you. Any other parting words for our audience, Nathan?
I think I encourage people to learn about nitric oxide. I encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel where we'll post interviews like this and lectures and podcasts. It's Dr. Nathan S. Bryan, nitric oxide on YouTube. I've got an educational website, drnathansbryan.com. I do monthly blogs there, try to give you practical, timely information to really just start making subtle changes as it relates to the things you're doing that may be disrupting nitric oxide production, and slowly over time optimizing your nitric oxide. And then for those that are interested in the product technology, it's n1o1.com. That's the letter N, the number one, the letter O, number one.com. And then obviously I'm searchable on most on most search engines. You can go to PubMed and find all the peer-reviewed publications we published over the years and just get informed and get educated.
Yeah, that's where the change starts. And that's where the change starts.
Yeah, knowledge is power only if you apply it.
Absolutely. Now, for those that are tuning in, I've asked Nathan to offer you all a free gift. Can you tell them about the gift, Nathan?
Yeah, so we're going to give my functional nitric oxide nutrition book away, an e-copy of the book. And I think it's an easy read, and I've really strived to make this a complex science of nitric oxide really understandable, easily understandable, so you can employ these principles and improve your nitric oxide production. So it's an ebook of functional nitric oxide nutrition. It's a quick read, a couple of hours, but I hope that it empowers you to really understand and appreciate this critical molecule and take steps to improve its production in your own body. And your body will thank you for it.
And there we have it. There is much available to you all to take such a powerful step in truly transforming your health on a biological, physiological, and also a mental level. Thank you, Nathan, for joining us here today.
Thank you so much. It's my honor.
Okay.